In the shadows of Toronto's cold nights, a voice emerged, haunting, hypnotic, and unapologetically raw. No face. No interviews. No backstory. Just sound. It spread across the internet like a rumor you couldn't verify but couldn't ignore. The melodies were beautiful. The lyrics were dangerous. And the artist behind them was building a myth in real time. He called himself The Weeknd. What began as anonymous uploads would grow into one of the most commercially dominant and visually distinctive careers in modern music. A catalog built on darkness and desire. A character shaped through alter egos, blood-red suits, broken mirrors, and blurred morality. Not just songs, a universe. Then came the pivot points, global chart domination, Hollywood doors opening, and a Super Bowl halftime show watched by over 100 million people. A performance that turned a once-hidden artist into a permanent cultural fixture. Behind it all stood a symbol repeated like a code, XO, more than a label, more than a brand, a movement. This documentary traces the construction of that universe, the sound, the persona, the spectacle, and the strategy. From underground mystery to stadium mythology. From dark artistry to global empire. This is not just the story of a singer. This is the architecture of The Weeknd. Before the awards, before the stadiums, before the red suits and the bright lights, there was a sound coming from the internet that felt unfinished, forbidden, and strangely addictive. No interviews. No press run. No face attached. Just music that sounded like confession and danger layered over slow, narcotic beats. Listeners didn't know the artist, but they recognized the mood. And that mystery was intentional. In the late 2000s, Abel Tesfaye was a young artist in Toronto navigating instability, leaving home as a teenager, moving between couches, temporary spaces, and creative circles that blended music, nightlife, and underground culture. Toronto itself would later be branded as a global music city, but at that time, its alternative R&B scene was fragmented and largely invisible. What emerged from that environment wasn't polished pop. It was atmosphere, moody, minimal, cinematic. In 2010, a handful of tracks began appearing online under a new name, The Weeknd, deliberately misspelled after a trademark conflict. No biography. No photos. No explanation. The absence of identity wasn't a marketing gap, it was the marketing strategy. Mystery became the entry point. The early songs, including What You Need, Loft Music, and The Morning, blended slow-burn production with explicit emotional and psychological themes. Detachment, intoxication, transactional relationships, emotional numbness. The vocals were soft but piercing, high-register, layered, almost ghost-like, contrasting sharply with the lyrical content. Critics later described the sound as a turning point in modern R&B, darker, more atmospheric, less romanticized than mainstream radio at the time. Instead of love songs, he wrote after-the-party songs. Instead of celebration, he wrote aftermath. In March 2011, The Weeknd released House of Balloons, the first of 3 mixtapes that would define his underground era. The project was distributed freely online, no label machine, no traditional rollout. The production, largely shaped with collaborator Jeremy Ilangelo, Rose and producer Doc McKinney, sampled indie and alternative records, creating textured, unconventional sonic layers. The mixtape received immediate critical attention from music blogs and tastemakers. Major artists, including Drake, publicly praised the project, accelerating its reach. But the core appeal remained unchanged. It sounded like something you weren't supposed to hear. 2 more mixtapes followed in rapid succession, Thursday and Echoes of Silence, completing what fans now call the Trilogy. Together, they formed a cohesive emotional and sonic arc, excess, vulnerability, emotional fallout. The projects explored recurring themes: emotional dissociation, substance use culture, fame without fulfillment, power imbalance in relationships, self-destructive cycles. The storytelling wasn't framed as moral or inspirational. It was observational, sometimes unsettling, often intentionally uncomfortable. This was not accidental branding, it was character construction. During this period, The Weeknd avoided media appearances and interviews. Live performances were rare. Promotional photos were minimal or obscured. The lack of visibility increased audience curiosity and gave listeners space to project their own interpretations onto the music. In a media environment built on oversharing, he chose silence. Mystery functioned as narrative control. By the time he began performing live shows in 2011 to 2012, the demand already existed. The audience arrived before the personality did. When he finally stepped on stage, the contrast was striking. A reserved performer delivering emotionally volatile material. No choreography, no spectacle, just voice and mood. The mythology grew stronger. This wasn't just a singer, it was a persona designed around emotional shadow. From the beginning, visual identity played a structural role. Album artwork, typography, and later music videos leaned into surrealism, psychological fragmentation, and nocturnal symbolism. As his career progressed, The Weeknd would repeatedly use visual eras, hairstyles, costumes, prosthetics, narrative video arcs, to represent psychological states and artistic phases. The blueprint starts here: music first, character second, visuals third, all aligned. By 2012, the anonymous experiment had succeeded. Without radio rotation, without major interviews, without traditional promotion, The Weeknd had built one of the most talked about underground catalogs in modern R&B, and major labels were now competing for his signature. The shadows had done their job, the mystery had created demand, and the next move would take that darkness from hidden corners of the internet to the center of global pop culture. Mystery can build attention, but only scale builds power. Within just a few years, the anonymous voice from the internet was no longer hidden in shadows. He was on award stages, topping global charts, and collaborating with the biggest names in pop music. The darkness didn't disappear, it evolved, sharpened, and went mainstream. This was not a sellout phase. It was a controlled expansion. After the Trilogy era established critical credibility, Abel Tesfaye made a strategic pivot. Transition from underground dominance to commercial infrastructure, without abandoning thematic identity. In 2013, he released his first studio album, Kiss Land. The project expanded his sonic palette, larger production, global influences, cinematic sequencing, but retained emotional isolation and psychological tension as core themes. Commercially, it performed solidly. Critically, it reinforced artistic seriousness. But the real inflection point came next. Between 2014 and 2016, The Weeknd executed one of the most effective crossover runs in modern music. Key releases included Earned It, recorded for the 50 Shades of Grey film soundtrack, earning major award recognition and introducing him to broader adult pop audiences. Beauty Behind the Madness, 2015, the album that converted critical respect into commercial domination. The album produced multiple global hits. Can't Feel My Face, upbeat, radio-friendly, Michael Jackson-influenced pop-funk. The Hills, dark, distorted, minimal, and thematically consistent with his earlier work. This dual-track strategy mattered. One record satisfied mainstream radio, the other preserved artistic continuity. He didn't abandon his base, he expanded around it. The result, multi-platinum success, Grammy recognition, and sustained chart presence. Most artists shift identity when crossing into pop. The Weeknd duplicated identity, running two aesthetics at once: accessible sound, inaccessible psychology. That duality became his competitive advantage. In 2016, Starboy marked another transformation, musically and visually. The album leaned into sleek, futuristic production and high-profile collaborations, including Daft Punk. Visually, he killed off his previous hairstyle and imagery in the Starboy music video, literally destroying earlier symbols of his persona on screen. It was narrative signaling, each era would overwrite the last. Not rebranding, episodic character evolution. The album debuted at #1 in multiple countries and reinforced his status as a reliable global hitmaker. As his audience grew, so did performance ambition. Tours became more theatrical. Lighting, staging, and narrative sequencing began to mirror film structure rather than concert structure. He wasn't just performing songs, he was staging moods. Music videos across this period increased in cinematic density, recurring characters, symbolic violence, psychological fragmentation, reinforcing the idea that each project existed inside a designed universe. This approach set the foundation for his most ambitious visual era yet. Then came the invitation that marks mainstream arrival in American entertainment, the Super Bowl halftime show. Not just a performance, a cultural referendum. In February 2021, The Weeknd headlined the Super Bowl 55 halftime show, one of the most watched live performance platforms in the world. Key facts that defined the moment. He became the first Canadian solo artist to headline the halftime show. He reportedly contributed millions of his own funds to expand production scale and creative control. The performance integrated the after-hours character arc, red suit, bandaged imagery, surreal staging. Set design included a mirrored maze sequence, visually representing disorientation and psychological distortion, consistent with the album's themes. The setlist functioned as a compressed career narrative, moving from darker material to global hits. Rather than abandon his aesthetic for mass appeal, he brought his aesthetic to mass scale. That distinction matters. The performance reached over 100 million viewers worldwide. For many, it was their first exposure to the full visual mythology behind the music. The mystery artist from anonymous uploads was now commanding the largest stage in American broadcast entertainment, without rewriting his artistic DNA. But global visibility creates new gravity. Film studios call, television networks call, cultural institutions call. The question shifts from can he succeed in music, to can the persona survive outside it? The next expansion wouldn't happen on albums. It would happen on screens. Pop stars get invited into Hollywood. Very few attempt to rewrite themselves inside it. For most musicians, film and television are side appearances, cameo roles, soundtrack placements, short-lived experiments. But for The Weeknd, the move toward the screen was not decorative. It was structural. He didn't just want songs in movies. He wanted authorship inside the frame. The Weeknd's relationship with film began not with acting, but with sound placement. His cinematic production style made his music highly adaptable to visual storytelling early in his mainstream rise. In 2014, he recorded Earned It for the film 50 Shades of Grey. The song became one of the most commercially successful soundtrack singles of the decade, earning major award nominations and introducing his voice to film-centered audiences beyond radio and streaming platforms. This moment established two things. His sound translated effectively into cinematic romance and tension. Studios recognized his ability to deliver emotionally targeted music for visual narratives. It was the entry point, not the destination. He continued contributing to major film-related music projects, including high-profile soundtrack collaborations and curated album work connected to blockbuster cinema releases. These projects positioned him not only as a performer, but as a curatorial voice, selecting collaborators, shaping sonic tone, and aligning music with narrative themes. Unlike typical soundtrack contributions, his selections leaned cohesive and mood-driven, consistent with his album-building approach. The pattern was emerging. He approached film music like world-building, not licensing. By this stage, The Weeknd's albums were already operating like films: recurring characters, visual motifs, narrative arcs across videos, and psychological continuity between releases. The move into screen storytelling was a format shift, not a philosophical one. His first major on-screen acting appearance came through television comedy, a guest role in a network sitcom where he played a fictionalized version of himself. The performance was deliberately self-aware and satirical, signaling that he understood celebrity image as material, something to be manipulated, not protected. It was a controlled test case: camera presence, scripted timing, audience reception, low risk, high learning value. The most ambitious Hollywood crossover came with the HBO drama series The Idol. The project marked a major escalation. He served as co-creator and co-writer. He starred in a leading acting role. He contributed directly to the show's music. He functioned as an executive producer. This was not cameo participation. It was structural control. The series explored fame, manipulation, celebrity culture, and psychological power dynamics inside the modern music industry, themes closely aligned with his long-standing artistic interests. Production of the series went through widely reported creative restructuring and leadership changes before release, drawing significant media attention even before audiences saw the final product. Critical and public reception to the show was sharply divided. Some reviewers criticized narrative choices and tonal execution. Others noted its attempt at uncomfortable industry satire. From a career strategy standpoint, the significance was clear. He was willing to accept reputational risk in exchange for creative authorship. Most musicians entering television choose safety. He chose control. Parallel to his television work, his music videos increased in cinematic scale and narrative continuity. Across multiple album eras, videos connected into chronological storylines, injuries carried forward, costumes remained consistent, psychological states evolved on screen. This created what analysts call visual album continuity, where each video functions like a scene rather than a standalone promo piece. Not marketing clips, narrative chapters. Directors, cinematographers, and production designers began treating his projects like short films rather than music videos, with extended runtimes, dialogue segments, and non-linear storytelling. As his industry footprint expanded, so did his proximity to Hollywood creators, directors, actors, fashion houses, and media producers. His collaborations increasingly crossed industry lines, blending music, fashion, and film aesthetics into unified releases and appearances. This cross-industry positioning strengthened three assets: cultural legitimacy beyond music charts, access to premium visual production teams, narrative influence over how his persona is portrayed. He was no longer just featured in culture, he was helping design it. Importantly, he maintained thematic consistency across mediums: fame, excess, identity fracture, emotional isolation, performance versus reality. Whether in albums, videos, or scripted television, the psychological territory remained aligned. Medium changed, motif didn't. That consistency preserved brand coherence during expansion, a failure point for many crossover artists. Music built the audience, film expanded the canvas. But neither alone explains the durability of his influence. Because behind the persona, behind the visuals, behind the spectacle, there is an infrastructure, a symbol repeated across albums, merchandise, tours, and culture. 2 letters. XO. Every major artist has fans. Very few build a flag. 2 letters, stamped on merch, chanted at concerts, embedded in lyrics, and repeated across social media bios, became more than a signature. They became affiliation. XO, not just a label, not just a slogan, a loyalty marker, and eventually, a business structure. XO began as an informal creative circle, a name attached to early collaborators and releases surrounding The Weeknd's first breakout era. The phrase appeared in song outros, track credits, and fan language long before it operated as a formal company. Its early meaning was deliberately ambiguous, interpreted by fans as hugs and kisses turned darker, or shorthand for excess and emotional extremes, consistent with the themes in his early catalog. Ambiguity increased adoption. Fans defined it themselves, and that made it stick. As The Weeknd's career scaled, XO evolved into a structured record label imprint, XO Records, operating in partnership with major label distribution. This hybrid model allowed for 2 strategic advantages: major label distribution power, internal creative control, and artist development. XO signed and developed multiple artists and producers connected to its sonic and cultural identity, extending the aesthetic beyond a single performer. This shifted XO from fan symbol to industry platform. Not just audience, roster. The label's output maintained recognizable traits: atmospheric production, genre-blending R&B and pop structures, dark or introspective tonal palettes. Consistency in sound functioned as brand reinforcement. Listeners could recognize the emotional signature even when The Weeknd himself wasn't on the track. That's how brand becomes genre-adjacent. XO merchandise played a central role in brand expansion. Rather than generic tour shirts, releases were structured more like fashion drops, limited runs, capsule collections, and collaborations with established designers and streetwear brands. Merch became identity wear, not memorabilia. Key characteristics of XO merch strategy: minimalist, symbol-forward design, black heavy color palettes aligned with brand mood, limited availability to drive demand, frequent drops tied to album eras and tours. This approach moved merchandise from revenue accessory to brand engine. Fans weren't just buying products, they were signaling membership. Fashion partnerships and capsule collaborations expanded reach into lifestyle markets, placing XO inside retail environments beyond music channels. The brand translated visually because it was built visually from the start. Global tours further embedded XO as a cultural marker. Stage design, visuals, and crowd interaction emphasized collective identity. Large logo displays, synchronized lighting motifs, recurring symbols from album eras. Tours were not only performance vehicles, they were brand rituals. Audience participation reinforced affiliation language. XO Till We Overdose became both lyric and chant, controversial in wording, effective in memorability. Repetition builds tribe. In the streaming and social era, XO expanded through digital fan ecosystems, fan pages, visual edits, lyric breakdown communities, and release night online events. The brand benefited from high visual consistency, making it easily memed, remixed, and circulated. Algorithmically, strong symbols outperform complex messages. XO is simple, repeatable, taggable. That increased unpaid distribution. Importantly, the brand did not detach from the artist's thematic core. XO content, visual, musical, and promotional, stayed aligned with the emotional and aesthetic territory that built the original audience: nocturnal mood, emotional intensity, cinematic framing. No brand drift. That discipline preserved authenticity perception, a key retention driver in fan economies. Behind the scenes, The Weeknd's career shows repeated patterns of strategic control. Structured visual eras tied to album cycles. Tight thematic continuity across mediums. Selective collaboration rather than oversaturation. Willingness to self-fund creative risk at major moments. Label imprint ownership participation. These are not accidental outcomes. They reflect brand architecture thinking, not just artistic output. Pop star on the surface. IP builder underneath. Measured by metrics, chart longevity, streaming records, global tour revenue, cross-industry presence, The Weeknd stands among the most commercially successful artists of his generation. Measured by influence, he helped normalize darker emotional palettes in mainstream R&B pop crossover and expanded cinematic storytelling inside music branding. Measured by infrastructure, XO transformed from tagline to enterprise. Artist persona brand platform. That sequence is rare and repeatable only with discipline. From anonymous uploads to global stages. From shadow aesthetics to halftime spectacle. From isolated persona to cultural infrastructure. The darkness was never the destination. It was the differentiator. And the symbol that started as a signature, XO, became the system that carries the legacy forward. The Weeknd began in the shadows of Toronto, anonymous, enigmatic, and untethered. Over the years, that darkness became a language, a mythology, a global phenomenon. From haunting mixtapes to record-breaking stadiums, from cinematic music videos to Hollywood ventures, and through the creation of XO as both identity and empire, his journey has been one of meticulous design, a rare fusion of artistry, strategy, and culture. And yet, the story isn't over. Every note, every visual, every era pushes forward, reminding us that influence isn't given, it's engineered. If you want more deep dives into the worlds behind the people shaping culture, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical.